Hi STEAM participants. You may remember me, Mr. Chris, and my wife, Miss Jamie, from last year's STEAM class from the Create summer camp. And while we aren't able to get together to do any fun and awesome experiments in person this year because of the quarantine, we thought we'd bring one right into your home that you can perform right from your kitchen. And so today we are going to be making crystal geodes out of eggshells. So before we begin, we should probably go over what you're going to need in order to do this experiment. So what you'll need is a measuring cup for water. You'll also need a half cup for salt and a tablespoon for some extra salt. You will need a spoon to stir the salt water, 2 small bowls, 2 eggs, your salt, of course, and then optional ingredients include food coloring, Elmer's glue, a toothpick, and any kind of brush. So the first thing you're going to want to do is to prepare your eggs. In order to do that, you'll want to crack your egg with the help of a parent or adult supervisor, and you can make your favorite kind of breakfast eggs with the egg, but you're going to want to keep the shells, and you're going to want to keep them mostly intact, so that's why it'll be really useful to have an adult around. And once you get those eggs ready, you're going to want to also wipe out the inner membrane, and then you will want to leave them to dry. While those are drying, you're going to want to prepare your salt solution. In order to do that, you can see I've already started. You're going to want to boil some water, so I'm going to add a little bit more water here and crank up the heat. And once the water is boiling, you're going to want to measure out a half cup of salt, and you're going to want to pour it in to the water and stir it until it dissolves. So what we're trying to do here, very hot, is to make a supersaturated solution. And this will go a little bit more quickly if the water's boiling. But what I mean by supersaturated solution is to continue adding salt into the water until the salt is no longer dissolving. And that will be indicative of the solution, i.e. the salt water, being fully saturated with the salt, because the water is no longer able to take more salt. I'm going to continue on while this is dissolving with explaining what to do, but after the initial salt is dissolved, you can add more salt until you see that the salt is no longer dissolving. Then, after you have a supersaturated solution, you're going to want to let the salt water cool. And while that is happening, you're going to want to prepare your eggs. So if you are going to be using glue to help set up some crystal seeds, this is what you'll be doing at this point. So what you'll want to do is take some glue and put it on a paper towel of some sort. I'm going to just go ahead and grab a paper towel. And then you're going to want to put a little bit of glue onto the paper towel, and then use your paintbrush to get a little bit of glue onto your paintbrush, and then just put a thin layer of glue on the inside of your eggshells. Okay. And then you're going to want to take some salt. You can just use it in your hand and set up some seeds, and the salt should be sticking to that thin layer of glue. And it won't take too long to dry because you've only put down a thin layer of glue. All right. I'm going to take a look at our salt solution now. That will have to do for the purposes of this. So, when you have a supersaturated solution, you should have your water, and then at the bottom you should still see some salt crystals because all of it was not able to dissolve into the solution. Okay, so after the water is cooled just a little bit, you are going to want to pour, with the help of an adult, some of that water into your eggshell. And then also around the eggshell. You pour some water into the eggshell so that the eggshell doesn't float. All right. And then here's where the food coloring comes in if you're going to be using food coloring. If you want it to look really pretty, you can take some food coloring and add 1 or 2 drops. Let's do different colors on the inside and outside. That sounds fun. Do this. And then over here, do a blue on the outside. And over here, a yellow. All right, and then you can use your toothpick to kind of stir that around and get that all spread out, that food coloring. All right. So, whoop, almost spilt it. You can hold the eggshell steady if you need to. All right. So, once that's done, you're basically done. This is the part where we will have to leave you guys because the next step is to wait, and it can take up to a week for all the water to evaporate. And once that happens, you're going to get deposits of salt crystals that have formed on, inside, and around your eggshell. The salt crystals we put on the inside, as I mentioned with the glue, will act as seeds, or in other words, will allow salt crystals to more readily grab onto the glued salt crystals, and that'll help the geode-like crystals to form more easily. But after the water is evaporated, you should hopefully have some beautiful egg salt geodes to display on your counter for as long as your parents let you. And that will be the end of the experiment. Before we go, some things you can think about with respect to this experiment are how much of different crystal-like substances, for instance sugar, it takes to dissolve in the same amount of water, and why different substances take more or less of that substance in order to form a supersaturated solution. What kind of crystals form the best geodes? So if you would use sugar instead of salt, whether you would have gotten the same result. And how naturally occurring geodes are formed. Because obviously we don't have boiling water in nature that forms these salt crystals, and it's not necessarily table salt either. So those are some things to think about, and maybe to use the internet or your local library to kind of look at the answers. And maybe eventually you can go on a vacation after the quarantine's done, go to a cave and see some of these for yourself. Me and Miss Jamie would like to thank you for joining our STEAM class again this year. We hope that you and your family are staying safe, and we look forward to seeing you again. So long now. Hi everybody, one last thing. By the time you finish waiting however long it takes for that water to evaporate, you should end up with something looking like this. Here are somebody else's eggshell geodes. So some other interesting things to think about are how the salt is left here. You'll remember that we dissolved the salt into the water, and over time, over the course of a couple days, that water is going to evaporate, leaving behind the salt crystals, which then grab onto the salt crystal seeds that we put onto the eggshells with glue, and build up into larger crystal formations. And as I had asked you to consider earlier, how that occurs naturally in nature. So too, would I also like you to consider how different colors in geodes occur naturally in nature, because as I'm sure you're aware, food coloring is not something that is dropped onto all the rocks in nature. Those colors occur naturally and they're beautiful. So I would also encourage you to take some time to look at how those crystals get their vibrant and beautiful colors. As the water evaporates in our eggshells, leaving behind the crystals, a similar process will happen in nature where water might be dripping or might end up in a deposit or a basin, and then over time, as that water evaporates, any of the mineral deposits that were in the water will be left behind, forming potentially crystal formations. So again, we hope that you really enjoyed this experiment. We hope that you will maybe send us some of the pictures of the results of your experiments, and we hope you have a great time and continue to stay safe out there. Thanks.